Vladimir Putin went on a victory lap of Syria and the Middle East this week, intent on showcasing his ability to secure the upper hand against the US in the region. On a surprise visit to a Russian air base on the Syrian coast, he demonstratively embraced the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, whose hold on power Russia's military intervention has all but saved. "Friends, the motherland is waiting for you," Mr. Putin told a detachment of Russian soldiers. "You are coming back home with victory." Meanwhile, in eastern Ghouta, a rebel-held suburb of Damascus where Russia had announced earlier this year that a ceasefire would take hold, children living under siege are starving. Despite the de-escalation deal, Syrian government forces continue to pound the area, backed by Iranian and Russian allies in an attempt to score a decisive victory. These two scenes spoke volumes about Russia's calculus, and about the realities it has helped create on the ground. That the Russian president has now announced a substantial troop withdrawal must be taken with a barrel of salt. Similar pledges have been made before and remain unfulfilled. On Tuesday, a Kremlin spokesperson said Russia would retain a sizable force in Syria to fight terrorists. Russia's definition of terrorism in Syria is like that of the Assad regime, which equates it to political opposition. Mr. Putin is keen to speak of victory. In Moscow, he has announced that he will run for re-election next year. Bringing back some of the Russian forces, who are reportedly deployed alongside thousands of Kremlin-connected private contractors, can only be good for his political prospects. Russian casualties in Syria are a closely guarded secret, as are the financial costs of the operation. In geopolitical terms, Mr. Putin's war in Syria has been a profitable investment for the Kremlin. He has capitalized on Western strategic disarray and America's reluctance to get drawn deeper into the conflict, an instinct that predated the volatile Donald Trump. After Syria, Mr. Putin traveled on to Cairo, where he met Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, demonstrating Russia's new clout in a country that since the 1970s has had privileged ties with the US. There is now talk of Russian military aircraft being able to use Egyptian bases. It is no small irony that Mr. Putin has claimed victory over Islamic State. The bluster does little to hide the fact that his forces focused much more on targeting the anti-Assad opposition than they did the jihadi insurgency. The retaking of Raqqa was not a Russian accomplishment, but the result of a Kurdish Arab ground offensive, supported by USILD coalition airstrikes. None of this has prevented Russia from claiming the diplomatic high ground. By changing the balance of forces and catching the West off guard when he sent forces in 2015, Mr. Putin has built up his leverage. Whether he can deliver a peace plan is, however, a different question. The signs are that the Russian president would prefer to sideline, if not entirely obstruct, unsponsored talks in Geneva. It helps that these discussions have been convened in the hope, rather than the expectation, of peace. He has explored other formats, alongside Iran and Turkey, but these are complex partners. Iranian-controlled forces have grown more dominant in Syria than Mr. Putin perhaps initially anticipated. It is also true that UN resources will be needed when, and if, Syria's reconstruction is one day contemplated. Geopolitical power games have not ended in Syria, nor has the fighting. In eastern Ghouta, according to the UN, 137 children, including babies, are in urgent need of medical evacuation. By propping up a dictator who starves and massacres his own population, Mr. Putin surely owns the desolation in Syria, as much as he controls military bases. Russia has returned to the Middle East, but its responsibilities in the bloodbath are equally on display.